My husband boasted to his pals, "This farcical marriage won't last another year." "She's not my equal," they roared. Approving of him, I grinned and countered, "Why drag this out? Let's finalize it today." Then I left. That night his best mate sent a text that stole my breath. You won't believe what I overheard one night. My own husband, sitting in my backyard, with our friends, toasting to the end of our marriage, and calling me beneath his level. Can you even imagine the shock? The absolute, gut-wrenching betrayal? It was a Thursday, our regular friends' night. I was carrying a tray of sizzling steaks out to the patio, the smell of charcoal and expensive meat filling the air. As I got closer to the French doors, Dominic's voice cut through the evening. "I doubt this joke of a marriage will survive another year. She's nowhere near my level anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. I froze. Through the glass, I could see Nathan, Trevor, and Marcus raising their glasses, their laughter sharp and congratulatory. They were literally toasting this declaration of war. They sat on my outdoor furniture, sipping my wine, eating food I prepared, in the home I'd paid for. And there, my husband, glowing with pride, accepting their validation that I was beneath him. Nathan even stood up to pat Dominic on the back, muttering something about how Dominic deserved better. My hands, miraculously, stayed steady as I set the tray down on the patio table. Every cell in my body was screaming, but they hadn't seen me yet. For what felt like an eternity, probably 30 seconds, I stood there, hidden by a pillar. I watched my husband bask in praise for planning to leave me, his ego inflated by men who had benefited countless times from my hospitality, my success. That steak, still sizzling, was now ice cold, just like my heart. Through the glass, I saw Trevor refilling glasses with the Chateau Margaux I'd been saving for our anniversary next month. Marcus had his feet up on the ottoman I'd special ordered from Italy after we renovated the patio last spring. They looked so comfortable, so at home in the life I'd built, celebrating Dominic's decision to throw it all away. "How long have you been feeling this way?" Nathan asked, leaning forward, eager for the juicy gossip. Dominic swirled his wine, a practiced, pretentious gesture he'd picked up from some YouTube video, not from actual knowledge. "Months. Ever since Ruby landed the Morrison Industries account. She acts like she single-handedly saved the company. The ego on her lately is unbearable. The Morrison Industries account, the one I'd pitched alone while Dominic was at a golf tournament in Palm Springs. The one that took 17 meetings, 3 redesign proposals, and a complete restructuring of our service offerings to land. That account, that one account, generated 40% of our revenue and led to 3 other Fortune 500 companies signing with us." "You built that company from nothing," Marcus chimed in, with the conviction of someone who'd never seen a single financial report in his life. "She just got lucky with a few good quarters." I watched Dominic nod, accepting this twisted version of history as fact. As if he hadn't been unemployed when we met. As if I hadn't built a successful freelance operation into an agency while he pursued one failed venture after another. The crypto trading platform that lost $60,000, the meal kit subscription service that never launched, the meditation app that couldn't compete with free alternatives. Each failure had eaten into our savings, the savings I'd built, while he promised the next idea would be the one. Trevor stood to grab another bottle from the wine fridge I'd installed in the outdoor kitchen. "You need someone who appreciates what you bring to the table, Dom. Someone who understands that being a visionary isn't about the day-to-day grunt work. Being a visionary, that's what Dominic called himself at dinner parties while I handled the actual vision of growing our company. He'd corner people with his theories about disrupting industries while I was closing deals, managing staff, and answering client calls at midnight. He'd pontificate about leadership philosophy while I led, about strategy while I strategized, about success while I succeeded. Ruby's changed," Dominic continued, his voice taking on that wounded, practiced tone. "She used to support my dreams. Now she just throws numbers in my face. Revenue this, profit margins that she doesn't understand that business is about more than spreadsheets." Nathan laughed, his cruel sound echoing across the patio I designed with a landscape architect. "Sounds like she's become one of those typical corporate drones. No vision, just execution. Just execution. The execution that took us from a home office to a downtown suite with 23 employees. The execution that meant Dominic could drive his BMW, wear his designer suits, play golf at the country club, and host these Thursday night gatherings where he apparently discussed how far beneath him I'd fallen. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Sarah, our senior developer. Morrison Industries loves the new campaign proposal. They're ready to sign the expansion contract tomorrow. You did it again. Tomorrow. I had the biggest meeting of our company's history tomorrow. A contract that would double our revenue and establish us as a major player in the industry. And here was my husband, my business partner, the man whose name sat beside mine on every company document, telling his friends our marriage was a joke. The thing is, Dominic said, pouring himself another glass, his fourth by my count. I've been documenting everything. Every time she makes a decision without consulting me, every time she undermines my authority with the staff, my lawyer says I have a strong case for taking at least half the company, maybe more. His lawyer, Derek Pohl's son, from the country club. The one he told me was just a racquetball partner. They'd been meeting about dividing assets I'd built, while I was busy building them. Smart man, Trevor said, raising his glass again. Get your ducks in a row before she knows what hit her. She won't see it coming. Dominic assured them, his confidence built on wine and the echo chamber of his friend's validation. Ruby thinks she's so smart with her presentations and contracts, but she doesn't understand the real game being played here. The real game. The game where he'd been planning to destroy me while sleeping in my bed, eating at my table, living off my success. The game where he'd convinced his friends, and probably himself, that I was the lucky one in this marriage. I picked up the tray of steaks, now cooled and needing reheating. Through the glass, I watched the four of them. These men who'd eaten at my table dozens of times, who'd celebrated holidays in my home, who'd benefited from my hospitality, while apparently believing I was beneath their friends' level. The Thursday night gatherings made sense now. Not poker games or strategy sessions, but planning meetings for my humiliation. Every week, while I worked late or traveled for business, they'd been reinforcing Dominic's delusions, feeding his ego, helping him construct a narrative where he was the victim of an ungrateful wife's success. I pushed open the French doors. The tray was still in my hands, the steaks now cold and forgotten. Four heads snapped towards me in perfect synchronization, their laughter dying mid-breath. Dominic's crystal tumbler stopped halfway to his lips, the amber liquid inside catching the light from the patio string lights I'd hung up last summer. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the distant hum of our neighbor's pool filter. Ruby! Dominic's voice cracked on my name, transforming from confident storyteller to a caught teenager in a single syllable. We were just... Why, wait a year! I set the tray down on the side table with deliberate calm, my voice carrying the same measured tone I used when firing underperforming vendors. Let's end it today. I wouldn't want you to endure another 12 months, married to someone so far beneath your level. Nathan's face went white. Trevor suddenly found his phone screen fascinating. Marcus actually took a step backward, nearly knocking over the citronella candle I'd lit earlier to keep mosquitoes away. But Dominic, my husband of 12 years, the man who'd promised to love and honor me in front of 200 guests, just stared at me with his mouth slightly open, no words coming out for once in his life. I turned and walked back through the French doors, leaving them frozen in their tableau of guilt. My footsteps on the hardwood echoed through the house as I headed straight for our bedroom. Behind me, I heard frantic whispers, chairs scraping against concrete. The panic of men who'd been caught not just gossiping, but conspiring. The master bedroom closet held my Samsonite luggage set, a gift to myself after closing our first $1 million contract. I pulled out the largest suitcase and laid it open on the bed we'd shared for 5 years in this house. My hands moved with surgical precision, folding blazers I'd worn to meetings Dominic hadn't attended, packing the jewelry I'd bought myself after each major business milestone, gathering the designer bags that represented bonuses he'd claimed were our success while contributing nothing to earning them. From the bathroom, I collected my skincare routine, the expensive serums and creams I'd invested in, because taking care of myself was one of the few things I could control while managing a business and a marriage to someone who resented my success. The medicine cabinet held my prescription bottles, vitamins, the sleeping pills I'd needed more frequently as Dominic's Thursday night gatherings had grown longer and louder. I heard footsteps on the stairs, multiple sets, hesitant and uncoordinated. They were coming up like children approaching a parent they disappointed, unsure whether they'd face rage or disappointment or something worse, indifference. "Ruby, please, can we talk about this?" Dominic appeared in the bedroom doorway, his carefully styled hair now disheveled from running his hands through it. Behind him, I could see Nathan hovering in the hallway, his face a mix of guilt and something else. Relief, maybe? "There's nothing to talk about." I zipped my toiletry bag closed and placed it in the suitcase. "You've made your position very clear. I'm beneath you. Our marriage is a joke. You've been meeting with Derek Pohl's son about divorce proceedings. What exactly would you like to discuss?" The color drained from his face at the mention of Derek. "How did you know about my lawyer?" I pulled my laptop bag from the closet, the one containing every password, every client contact, every piece of intellectual property I developed for our company. "The same way I know about the separate bank account you opened in January. The same way I know you've been telling potential investors that I'm emotionally unstable and hurting the company with my ego." Nathan stepped into view behind Dominic, and something in his expression made everything click into place. The guilt wasn't just about tonight. It was deeper, older, carrying the weight of extended betrayal. "It was you," I said, looking directly at Nathan. "You sent me that anonymous message an hour ago. Check your husband's Thursday night meetings. You need to know what he's saying about you." Dominic spun around to face his best friend, his face contorting with a rage I'd never seen directed at anyone but me. "You warned her." Nathan straightened his shoulders, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked like an adult rather than an overgrown fraternity brother. "I've been sending her screenshots for 3 weeks, Dom. Every message in our group chat where you talked about hiding assets. Every discussion about Project Gaslight. Every time you bragged about how you were going to take half of everything Ruby built while painting her as the villain. Project Gaslight." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You actually named it like it was some kind of military operation instead of just destroying your wife's reputation." Trevor and Marcus had crept up the stairs, drawn by the drama they'd helped create. They stood in the hallway like actors who'd forgotten their lines, their earlier bravado evaporated in the face of real consequences. "The Thursday night gatherings," Nathan continued, his voice gaining strength, "were never about poker. They were planning sessions. Dom would tell us his latest strategy for documenting your supposed instability. Taking photos of you working late to prove you were neglecting the marriage, recording conversations out of context, building a case that you were the problem while he was the long-suffering husband trying to hold everything together." I folded my last dress, the red one I'd worn to the company Christmas party, where Dominic had given a speech about partnership and shared success, while I knew he'd contributed nothing to our quarterly numbers. "And you all just went along with it." "We thought." Marcus started, then stopped, realizing there was no acceptable way to finish that sentence. "You thought what?" I faced them all. These men who'd eaten at my table, whose birthdays I'd remembered, whose wives I'd consoled through their own marital problems. That it was funny, that it was justified, that I deserved to be destroyed because I had the audacity to be successful. Silence filled the bedroom, heavy and suffocating. Dominic's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, his jaw working as he searched for words that might salvage the situation. But we both knew there weren't any. You couldn't unsay what I'd heard. You couldn't undo 3 months of planning my destruction. You couldn't take back. "She's nowhere near my level," when the evidence of whose level was who stood all around us, in the house I'd bought with the money I'd earned. I closed the bedroom door behind me with a soft click that felt louder than any slam could have been. My suitcase wheels whispered against the hallway carpet as I passed the gallery wall of our wedding photos, each frame a monument to promises that had apparently meant nothing to Dominic. Behind the door, I could hear raised voices. Dominic turning his fury on Nathan, the very friend who'd finally grown a conscience after 3 months of complicity. The elevator in our building moved with excruciating slowness, giving me too much time to think about what I was leaving behind. Not just the house or the marriage, but the version of myself who'd believed love meant endless compromise, who'd minimized her own achievements to protect a fragile ego, who'd paid bills while pretending not to notice her husband plotting her downfall with his Thursday night conspirators. The Marriott downtown blazed against the evening sky, its glass facade reflecting the city I'd conquered one client at a time while Dominic played pretend. I walked through the lobby with my shoulders straight, refusing to look like a woman fleeing her home. The desk clerk, a young woman with kind eyes and a professional smile, didn't ask questions when I requested an executive suite for a week. Paying with a credit card Dominic didn't know existed. My emergency fund, built from bonuses I'd never mentioned, because I'd learned years ago that financial independence was oxygen in a suffocating marriage. The suite on the 23rd floor overlooked the business district, where tomorrow I'd still have to face the Morrison Industries executives, pretending my life hadn't just imploded. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city lights beginning to twinkle as evening settled over downtown. The space was sterile and perfect. No memories embedded in the furniture. No ghosts of better times haunting the corners. No trace of 18-year scotch or false laughter. My phone had been vibrating continuously since I'd left the house. Dominic's name appeared again and again on the screen. The messages progressing through predictable stages. First, the anger. You're being dramatic. Get back here now. Then the manipulation. You misunderstood everything. We need to talk. The false apology. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. And finally, the threats. You're destroying our company with this stunt. The investors will pull out if they hear about this. I set the phone on the marble bathroom counter and turned on the shower, letting the water heat until steam filled the room. Standing under the rainfall shower head, water cascading over me with a pressure our home shower had never achieved, I finally let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. 12 years. I'd spent 12 years building a life with someone who'd been documenting my destruction, gathering evidence for a war I didn't know we were fighting. The tears came then, mixing with the shower water. My sobs echoing off the marble walls, where no one could hear them. I stayed under that water until it ran cold, until my skin was pruny and my eyes were swollen, until I'd cried out not just the betrayal, but the humiliation of not seeing it sooner. All those Thursday nights when I prepared food for his gatherings. All those mornings when I'd kissed him goodbye before heading to meetings he claimed to support. All those presentations where he'd stood beside me taking credit for work he'd never done. I'd been performing in a play where everyone knew the ending except me. By the time I emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in the hotel's plush robe, the sun had fully set. The city below looked different from this height. Smaller, manageable, like a problem that could be solved with the right strategy. I ordered room service, not because I was hungry, but because I needed to remember how to take care of myself without considering someone else's preferences. Salmon, not steak. Pinot Grigio, not bourbon. A chocolate soufflé, because Dominic had always called dessert unnecessary calories, and I'd forgotten what it felt like to be unnecessary. Patricia Winters answered her phone on the second ring, even though it was past 9 o'clock. Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd been waiting for this call. I've been expecting to hear from you, Ruby. Nathan Blackstone already sent me an overview of the situation. That stopped me mid-bite of salmon. Nathan contacted you 2 hours ago. He wants to make sure you have everything you need to protect yourself and the company. He's prepared to provide sworn testimony about Dominic's financial manipulation and the conspiracy to manufacture evidence of instability. Patricia's tone was matter-of-fact, as if husbands plotting their wives' destruction was just another Tuesday in her world. Can you meet me at 8 tomorrow morning? My office. Bring any documentation you have. Bank statements, company records, communication logs. Everything. I agreed, then spent the next 3 hours organizing files on my laptop, creating folders with the kind of detailed labeling that had made our company successful. Dominic's failed ventures contained the documentation of every dollar I'd invested in his dreams. $60,000 in crypto platforms, $40,000 in the meal kit service, $30,000 in the meditation app that never launched. Company contributions held every contract I'd negotiated, every client I'd landed, every late night I'd worked while Dominic's office remained dark. Financial manipulation would soon hold whatever Nathan was about to deliver. At midnight, a knock at my door made me freeze. Through the peephole, I saw Nathan standing in the hallway, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, holding 3 bankers' boxes stacked in his arms. His usual swagger was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine shame. I opened the door without speaking, stepping aside to let him enter. He set the boxes on the coffee table, then stood awkwardly in the center of the suite, his hands shoved in his pockets like a teenager caught shoplifting. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that watching him poison everyone against you while you were literally keeping the company afloat, it's been eating at me for months." "Then why did you go along with it for so long?" I asked Nathan, genuinely wanting to understand how someone could watch this manipulation unfold week after week and stay silent. He sank into the hotel suite's armchair, running his hands through his hair in a gesture that made him look exhausted. At first, I thought he was just venting. You know how guys complain about their marriages. But then it became something else. He started taking notes during your phone calls, screenshotting your texts out of context, building this whole narrative where you were the villain. And we just let him. I opened the first banker's box, finding manila folders labeled in Dominic's handwriting. Financial discrepancies, emotional instability evidence, asset documentation. Inside were printed emails I'd sent him about normal business operations, annotated with his interpretations. A message about working late became proof of marital abandonment. A request to review contracts became controlling behavior. He twisted every interaction into evidence for a story that existed only in his mind. "This goes back to January," I said, holding up a folder dated 5 months ago. "He's been planning this since the beginning of the year." Nathan nodded, unable to meet my eyes. "Right after you landed the Samsung contract. That's when he really changed. Before that, he could pretend he was equals with you. But that deal made it clear who was really running things. His ego couldn't handle it." The second box contained something worse. Photographs. Pictures of me at my desk at 10 p.m., taken through the office window. Screenshots of my LinkedIn posts about company growth, highlighted and annotated with comments about my narcissistic need for attention. Even photos from my sister Claire's birthday dinner, where apparently my 2 glasses of wine were evidence of a drinking problem. "He asked us to collaborate," Nathan continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Trevor was supposed to report if he saw you at lunch with any male clients. Marcus tracked your social media for anything that could be twisted. I was assigned to monitor your relationship with the staff, looking for any signs of what Dominic called inappropriate professional boundaries." The third box was the most damaging. Financial records, but not just ours. Dominic had been setting up a shadow company, registering an LLC in Delaware, even approaching our clients with a new venture he'd be launching soon. The name on the paperwork was Morrison Strategic Solutions, deliberately similar to our company, Morrison Digital Innovations. Close enough to confuse clients, but different enough to claim coincidence. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Emergency. Dominic just sent an all-staff email claiming you're having a mental health crisis, and he's taking temporary control of operations. What should I do?" I showed Nathan the message. His face went pale. "He's escalating faster than we thought." I called Patricia immediately, putting her on speaker. "Dominic just sent a company-wide email claiming I'm having a mental health crisis." "Forward it to me immediately," Patricia said, her voice sharp with focus. "I'm filing an emergency injunction right now. This crosses into defamation and potential fraud." "Nathan, are you there?" "Yes," he answered, straightening in his chair. "I need you to send me everything you have about this Project Gaslight immediately. Every message, every meeting note, every shred of evidence. Ruby, do not respond to that email. Do not contact your staff directly yet. Let me handle this legally first." After Patricia hung up, Nathan and I worked in silence, organizing documents, creating digital copies, building the case that would protect not just my company, but my reputation. At 2 a.m., he finally asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you hate me for not speaking up sooner?" I considered lying, offering forgiveness I didn't feel yet, but I was done with polite dishonesty. "I don't know what I feel about you, Nathan. You watched my husband plan my destruction for months. You participated in it. The fact that you grew a conscience eventually doesn't erase that." He nodded, accepting the judgment. For what it's worth, Sophie threatened to leave me if I didn't come forward. She said if I could watch this happen to you, she'd never be able to trust me not to do it to her someday. "Smart woman," I said, meaning it. Sophie had seen what I'd missed, that someone who could participate in this level of deception was capable of anything. My phone rang at 3 a.m., a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. Ruby, this is Trevor's wife, Linda. Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying. I just found out what they've been doing. Trevor came home drunk from your house tonight. Told me everything. I'm disgusted. I want you to know I have recordings. Recordings. Trevor would come home from those Thursday nights and brag about what they discussed. He thought it was funny, watching Dominic plan this elaborate scheme. I started recording him after the third week because something felt wrong. I have hours of him describing their plans, laughing about how you had no idea what was coming. Another ally emerging from an unexpected corner. Can you send them to my lawyer? Already uploaded them to a cloud drive. I'll send you the link. Ruby, I'm filing for divorce too. If Trevor could participate in something this cruel, what else is he capable of? What would he do to me if I ever out-earned him or made him feel small? After Linda hung up, I stood at the window watching the city sleep below. Somewhere out there, Dominic was probably pacing our house, realizing his carefully constructed plan was collapsing. His friends were turning on him. His lawyer would see the evidence and advise surrender. The staff he tried to manipulate would choose the person who'd actually built their careers. Nathan stood to leave at 4 a.m., gathering his coat with movements that seemed to hurt. At the door, he turned back one more time. The ironic thing is Dominic was never below your level, Ruby. You would have carried him forever if he'd just been grateful instead of resentful. You loved him enough to make him equal, even when he wasn't. That's what he never understood. I closed the door behind Nathan and stood alone in my hotel suite, watching the sun begin to rise over the city. 4 hours of sleep would have to be enough. Today's investor meeting would determine not just the future of my company, but whether Dominic's carefully crafted narrative would collapse under the weight of evidence. I showered quickly, chose my sharpest black suit, the one I'd worn when closing the Samsung deal, and applied makeup to hide the exhaustion that threatened to show through. Patricia called as I was leaving the hotel. The emergency injunction went through. Dominic is legally barred from accessing company accounts or making any operational decisions without board approval. He'll receive notice this morning, probably right before the meeting. He's going to be furious. Let him be. Anger makes people sloppy. I've also sent the evidence package to each board member individually. They'll have had time to review it before you all gather. The office building stood against the morning sky like a monument to everything I'd built. I arrived at 6 a.m., using my keycard to enter through the executive entrance. The building was nearly empty, just security and the overnight cleaning crew, who nodded in recognition. They'd seen me here at all hours over the years, unlike Dominic, whose badge rarely registered activity before 10 a.m. Nathan was already in the conference room, arranging printed documents with methodical precision. He'd changed clothes, but hadn't slept either, judging by the coffee cups already accumulating on the side table. We worked without speaking at first, creating stations of evidence around the room. Financial records at one end, client testimonials at another, the project Gaslight documentation prominently displayed where Dominic would have to face it. He'll try to spin this as a marital dispute that shouldn't affect business, Nathan said, adjusting the projection screen. That's his opening move. Make it personal, not professional. And when he does, I replied, that's when you show slide 17, his LLC filing for the competing company. Nothing says professional betrayal like trying to poach your own clients while still drawing a salary. Sarah arrived at 8 a.m. with her laptop and a grim expression. Half the staff is ready to testify if needed. The other half is updating their resumes in case this goes badly. It won't go badly, I said with more confidence than I felt. Not for them, anyway. The board members began arriving at 9:03 a.m. Margaret Chin first, her expression unreadable as. She nodded to me before taking her seat. James Harrison from our biggest client account. Technically not a board member, but invited given his company's stake in our stability. 2 other investors, Robert Kim and David L. Conquo, both of whom had questioned Dominic's contributions during previous meetings, only to be met with his deflection and my diplomatic interventions. At 9:05 a.m., Patricia entered and sat beside me. Her presence a clear signal that this was no longer just a business discussion. The legal implications hung in the air like a threat. At exactly 10 a.m., Dominic walked in wearing the Tom Ford suit I'd bought him for our 10th anniversary. The one he'd worn to accept an industry award for work I'd done while he was in Cabo. His cologne preceded him, the same expensive scent he'd worn to every meeting where he'd taken credit for my achievements. He paused when he saw the room's configuration. Nathan beside me instead of with him, Patricia's presence, the board's serious expressions. His eyes found Nathan, and the look that passed between them could have frozen fire. Nathan didn't flinch, though I saw his jaw tighten. Dominic recovered quickly, his salesman's smile sliding into place as he took his seat. "I appreciate everyone gathering on short notice," Dominic began, pulling out note cards he'd obviously prepared. "I know there have been concerns about recent disruptions to our leadership structure. I want to assure you that despite my wife's current emotional state—" "I'll stop you right there," Margaret Chin interrupted, her voice cutting through his performance like a blade. "We've reviewed the documentation provided by Mrs. Morrison's legal counsel. Your claims about her mental state appear to be not just unfounded, but deliberately fabricated." Dominic's smile flickered. "I understand Ruby has painted a certain picture. The picture was painted by your own messages, Mr. Morrison." David L. Conquo held up a printed screenshot. "This group chat where you discuss Project Gaslight, where you strategize about documenting false evidence of instability. These are your words, are they not?" I clicked to the first slide of my presentation, displaying Dominic's message from 6 weeks ago. "Keep documenting everything. We need to show a pattern of erratic behavior, even if we have to create it." The room went silent. Dominic's face cycled through emotions. Shock that his private messages were exposed, anger at Nathan's betrayal, and finally, the desperate calculation of someone trying to salvage an unsalvageable situation. "Those messages were taken out of context," he tried. "Nathan clearly has his own agenda here." "My agenda," Nathan spoke for the first time, his voice steady, "is making sure the truth is known. For 3 months, I watched you plan to destroy the woman who built this company while you contributed nothing but obstruction and stolen credit. You were part of it." Dominic burst out, revealing more than he intended. "You sat there every Thursday, participating, encouraging." "Yes," Nathan said simply. "I did, and I was wrong. The difference is I'm trying to make it right." I advanced to the next slide. Financial records showing every major contract color-coded by who had actually closed the deal. My column was solid blue. Dominic's was empty white space. "Over the past 24 months, I began, my voice carrying the authority I'd earned through actual achievement, I've personally closed 17 major contracts, totaling $32 million in revenue. During that same period, Mr. Morrison has closed 0 contracts while drawing a salary of $400,000 annually." James Harrison leaned forward. "Ruby, we need to be clear about something. Harrison Tech has never considered Dominic a factor in our decision to work with your company. Every strategic discussion, every campaign adjustment, every innovation has come from you. We've tolerated his presence in meetings out of respect for you, but he's never contributed a single valuable insight." The blood drained from Dominic's face as he realized his largest client had just publicly dismissed his entire professional existence. Dominic's mouth opened and closed silently, searching for words that could counter James Harrison's dismissal. The conference room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in on a man who just discovered his professional reputation was a fiction only he believed. I clicked to the next slide, showing the registration documents for Morrison Strategic Solutions, his shadow company designed to steal our clients. "This concludes my presentation," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "The board has all the evidence needed to make an informed decision about the company's future leadership structure." Derek Polson, Dominic's own attorney, had been silent throughout the presentation, his expression growing increasingly grim with each revealed document. Now he leaned forward, addressing his client with the detached professionalism of someone cutting their losses. "Dominic, we need to discuss your options privately," Derek said, already gathering his papers. The message was clear. The legal battle Dominic had been planning was over before it began. Margaret Chin stood, smoothing her skirt with deliberate precision. "We'll reconvene tomorrow morning to formalize the transition. Mr. Morrison, I suggest you use the time to consider Patricia's buyout offer carefully. It's more generous than what a court might determine given this evidence." The meeting dissolved with the awkward shuffle of people fleeing an uncomfortable scene. Dominic remained seated, staring at the projection screen where his own words about Project Gaslight still glowed accusingly. Nathan paused at the door, looking back at his former friend with something between pity and relief, then left without speaking. That evening, alone in my hotel suite with Chinese takeout growing cold on the coffee table, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, exhausted from the emotional toll of the day's confrontation. "Ruby, this is Linda Chin, Trevor's wife." Her voice carried the tremor of someone who'd been crying. "I need to tell you something about what's been happening in your absence." I set down my chopsticks, suddenly alert. Linda and I had spoken perhaps 5 times in 8 years, always pleasant but superficial conversations at group dinners. "Trevor came home from the investor meeting today," she continued. "And he was different. He told me everything about what they've been doing to you. But Ruby, it's worse than you know. Dominic had been coaching all of them on how to handle their wives. He called it maintaining frame and strategic relationship management. My stomach turned. "What do you mean? Coaching them?" I found Trevor's journal. Pages and pages of Dominic's advice. How to document your wife's spending to make her look irresponsible. How to gaslight her about social situations, making her doubt her memory. How to position yourself as the rational one while painting her as emotional and unstable. Trevor's been using these tactics on me for months, and I thought I was going crazy. The parallel destruction of marriages. Dominic hadn't just been planning my downfall. He'd been teaching his friends to destroy their own wives' confidence and credibility. A masterclass in manipulation disguised as Thursday night poker games. "I showed Trevor the journal," Linda continued, her voice stronger now. "Made him read his own words back to me. The look on his face when he realized what Dominic had turned him into. Ruby, I've never seen my husband cry before today. What's he going to do? He's cutting Dominic out completely. He's also agreed to couples counseling, though I'm not sure our marriage will survive this. How do you rebuild trust when someone's been systematically undermining you with coaching from your friend?" After Linda hung up, I sat in the darkness of my suite, city lights twinkling below like distant stars. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "You need to see what's happening at the country club." She attached a photo someone had sent her. Dominic, disheveled and clearly intoxicated, holding court at the bar with anyone who would listen. Even in the grainy image, you could see the other patrons leaning away. The bartender's expression of professional patience, wearing thin. Barbara Fitzgerald called an hour later. The judge's wife, connected to everyone who mattered in our social circle, a woman who collected information like others collected art. "I was at the club this evening," she said without preamble. "Dominic's been there every day since your separation became public. Today, he was telling people he built your company single-handedly, that you were just a pretty face he used for client meetings." The delusion was so complete that even strangers were exchanging concerned looks. Did anyone believe him? Barbara laughed, a sharp sound that contained no humor. The bartender told me Dominic's rants have become entertainment for the regular afternoon crowd. They call it storytime with Dom and take bets on which accomplishment he'll claim next. Yesterday, he said he invented a revolutionary trading algorithm. Today, it was a meditation app that Apple tried to buy for millions. The man I'd married was dissolving into a caricature of himself, his lies growing more elaborate as his reality crumbled. Part of me felt the sharp satisfaction of watching karma unfold in real time. Another part, buried deeper, mourned the person he might have been if ego hadn't consumed him. My phone buzzed again. A Facebook message from Emma Rodriguez, Marcus's girlfriend. I'd met her twice at dinner parties, remembered her as quiet but observant. The kind of person who noticed everything while saying little. "I need you to know what Marcus was planning with Dominic. I'm ending things with him, but you deserve to see this first." Attached were screenshots that made my blood run cold. Detailed plans for approaching our clients after the divorce, claiming I'd had a breakdown, offering to maintain continuity through Dominic's new agency. They drafted emails, created a timeline for client poaching, even designed logos that deliberately mimicked our company's branding. But the worst part was the list of employees they planned to recruit with notes about each person's vulnerabilities. Sarah, single mom, needs stability, will follow the money. Kevin, desperate for promotion, easy to manipulate with promises. They'd studied my team like predators studying prey. Emma's final message arrived as I was processing the screenshots. Marcus doesn't know I have these. I'm sending them to your lawyer, too. No woman should have to deal with this level of betrayal. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. The fumbling attempt at corporate theft would have been pathetic if it wasn't so malicious. I forwarded Emma's screenshots to Patricia immediately, my fingers steady despite the rage burning through my chest. The evidence of planned corporate theft transformed our civil divorce into something potentially criminal. Patricia responded within minutes. This changes everything. We're adding fraud charges to our leverage. He'll have to accept whatever terms we offer now. 6 months crawled by with the painful slowness of recovery. I moved from the hotel suite to a furnished apartment downtown, needing space that had never known Dominic's presence. The company stabilized and then thrived without his interference, landing 3 new major clients who'd been hesitant to commit while our leadership situation remained uncertain. Nathan proved himself invaluable as director of operations, his guilt driving him to work harder than anyone else, though I still couldn't look at him without remembering those 3 months of complicit silence. The morning of our divorce finalization arrived, gray and drizzling, a weather that matched the strange melancholy of officially ending something that had been dead for months. I dressed carefully in a new suit, one Dominic had never seen, applying makeup that emphasized strength rather than softness. Patricia met me in the lobby of her building, her expression professionally neutral, but her hand briefly squeezing my shoulder in support. The conference room smelled of leather and old coffee, windows overlooking the city where I'd rebuilt my life. Dominic was already there when we entered, and the transformation stopped me mid-step. The man who'd once strutted through life in Tom Ford suits now wore a basic button-down from Target, wrinkled at the elbows. His face had thinned dramatically, 40 pounds gone, along with his delusions of grandeur. The BMW he'd loved more than our marriage had been replaced with a decade-old Honda, according to Patricia's investigator. His hands shook as he held the pen. His attorney, the third one he'd hired after Derek dropped him and the second quit, looked like someone fresh from law school, probably working for a fraction of what Derek had charged. The young man kept checking his notes, clearly overwhelmed by Patricia's presence and the mountain of evidence we compiled. "The terms remain as discussed," Patricia said, sliding the final settlement across the table. "Mrs. Morrison retains full ownership of Morrison Digital Innovations, all associated intellectual property, the house, and all investment accounts. Mr. Morrison receives his personal belongings, the cryptocurrency wallets from his failed ventures, and his grandfather's watch. No alimony, no future claims on the business. The non-compete clause stands for 5 years within the digital marketing industry." Dominic's signature looked like a child's scrawl. Nothing like the confident flourish he'd once used on contracts he hadn't earned. He couldn't meet my eyes, staring instead at the table where his dreams of stealing half my empire had died. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "I know you won't believe me, but I'm sorry." I looked at him, then really looked at him. This hollow shell of the man who'd once charmed me with false confidence and borrowed dreams. "You're right," I said quietly. "I don't believe you." He signed the last page and left without another word, his footsteps echoing down the hallway like a funeral march for the person he'd pretended to be. 2 weeks later, the Forbes journalist arrived at our offices with a photographer and an agenda to tell what she called the story of the year. Catherine Wells was sharp-eyed and direct, the kind of reporter who saw through surface presentations to find deeper truths. She didn't want to hear about quarterly projections or market strategies. She wanted the raw truth about discovering betrayal and transforming it into fuel for success. "Tell me about the night you found out," she said, her recorder placed between us on the conference table where Dominic had once claimed my achievements as his own. I told her everything. The Thursday night gathering where I'd stood holding stakes while my husband called our marriage a joke. Nathan's conscience finally awakening after 3 months of complicity. The Project Gaslight documents that revealed systematic planning to destroy my reputation. The way my team had rallied around me while Dominic's friends abandoned him one by one. "What strikes me," Catherine said, making notes in shorthand I couldn't read, "is that you didn't seek revenge. You simply revealed the truth and let consequences unfold naturally. The best revenge is building something so successful that the person who tried to destroy you becomes irrelevant," I replied. Dominic thought I was beneath his level. Now he's working at a startup in Buffalo, while I'm running a company valued at $12 million. The universe has its own sense of justice. Her article would run with a headline: How Ruby Morrison Built a Digital Empire While Divorcing Dead Weight, and it reached 2 million readers in its first week. My inbox flooded with messages from women sharing similar stories, thanking me for showing them what survival looked like when transformed into success. A month after the divorce finalized, a handwritten letter arrived at the office, forwarded from an address in Buffalo. Dominic's handwriting, shaky now where it had once been confident, filled 3 pages with what he probably thought was an apology. But even in his attempt at remorse, the delusion persisted. He wrote about our success, about how he'd helped build the company, about being a victim of circumstances rather than the architect of his own destruction. He actually suggested that maybe once emotions had cooled, we could discuss him consulting for the company. His expertise, he claimed, could still add value. I filed the letter in a folder marked Evidence/Closed and locked it in the bottom drawer of my desk, not because I needed it anymore, but as a reminder that some people could stand in the ruins of their own making and still believe they were the hero of the story. The company holiday party that year took place at Vincenzo's, the Italian restaurant where Dominic had once held court with clients he hadn't earned. I'd reserved the entire upper floor, wanting to celebrate not just our financial success, but our collective survival. Sarah had organized everything perfectly, from the wine selection to the seating arrangements that kept the most talkative employees strategically separated. As dinner wound down and wine loosened tongues, Sarah stood to make a toast. I expected something about quarterly numbers or client wins. Instead, she raised her glass with tears in her eyes. To survival, she said simply, and to leaders who earned their titles instead of stealing them. The toast hung in the air as glasses clinked around the restaurant's upper floor. Then, unexpectedly, our CFO Margaret stood up, her voice wavering with emotion I'd never seen from her in 5 years of working together. "Since we're sharing," she began, gripping her wine glass like an anchor, "my ex-husband convinced me I was terrible with numbers. Me, with a master's degree in accounting. He checked my work, questioned every calculation, make me doubt myself until I nearly quit finance altogether. It took 2 years of therapy after our divorce to realize he was threatened by my salary being higher than his. Kevin, our lead developer, cleared his throat. My college girlfriend used to introduce me as playing with computers when I was building the app that eventually sold to Microsoft. She said real jobs required wearing suits. The stories poured out like water through a broken dam. Every person in that room had been diminished by someone who claimed to love them. We weren't just colleagues anymore. We were survivors of the same war, fought on different battlefields. The evening transformed from a corporate celebration into something deeper. A recognition that Dominic's behavior wasn't unique. Just another verse in an old, tired song that too many of us had been forced to hear. 11 months later, the invitation arrived on cream-colored cardstock with gold lettering. Nathan and Sophie's wedding. I debated attending. The wound of his complicity still tendered despite his eventual help. But Sophie had called personally, her voice warm and genuine. "You saved us both," she'd said. "Nathan from becoming someone I couldn't love, and me from marrying that person." The ceremony took place at a vineyard outside the city. Rows of grapes stretching toward mountains painted purple by the setting sun. I sat 3 rows back, close enough to see, but not so close as to claim a friendship we no longer had. Nathan looked nervous in his navy suit, constantly adjusting his tie until Sophie appeared at the aisle. During the reception, after the traditional toasts from family, Nathan stood unexpectedly, tapping his champagne flute for attention. The tent fell silent, 200 guests turning toward him with expectant smiles. But his eyes found mine across the room, and I knew this speech wasn't for them. "Before I talk about Sophie," he began, his voice carrying the weight of practiced words, "I need to address something. 11 months ago, I participated in something shameful. I watched a friend plan to destroy his wife's reputation and career. And I not only stayed silent, I helped. I took screenshots. I documented conversations. I enabled a man's delusions because it was easier than confronting the truth." The silence in the tent became absolute. Sophie stood beside him, her hand on his arm, her expression proud rather than embarrassed. Ruby Morrison is here tonight, Nathan continued, and head swiveled to find me. She built an empire while her husband planned her downfall. She showed grace when I finally found my conscience at the 11th hour. But the real hero of this story is my wife Sophie, who told me that night that if I didn't warn Ruby immediately, she would leave me. She said, and I'll never forget this, if you can watch this happen to her, how do I know you won't do it to me someday? The applause started slowly, then built to something thunderous. Sophie kissed Nathan's cheek, whispered something that made him smile, and I raised my glass in acknowledgement of an apology I hadn't expected but somehow needed. Later, as the band played and couples swayed under string lights, Sophie found me at the bar. He tortures himself about those 3 months, she said quietly. Wakes up sometimes, asking what would have happened if he'd spoken up sooner. What happened happened, I replied, meaning it. We all got where we needed to be. 3 weeks later, planning Mom's 70th birthday. Party became my focus. The country club's event coordinator, the same woman who'd handled Dominic's and my anniversary party 2 years ago, didn't mention the irony as we selected menus and flower arrangements. The grand ballroom would host 80 guests, 3 generations of Morrison women, and the people who'd supported us through triumphs and disasters. The night of the party, Mom stood at the center of the room in elegant navy, surrounded by her sisters, my cousins, my teenage niece, Lily, who just won a coding competition. Looking at them, I saw our family's evolution. My grandmother's generation, who'd been told to be grateful for any opportunity. My mother's generation, who'd worked twice as hard for half the recognition. My generation fighting for equality while juggling tradition. And Lily's generation, who simply expected fairness as their birthright. Mom pulled me aside near the dessert table, champagne making her more honest than usual. I saw it, you know, she said quietly. How Dominic dismissed your achievements. Took credit for your work. I should have said something. Why didn't you? She looked across the room at my father, steady and supportive. After 45 years, my generation was taught that marriage was private, that interference caused more harm than help. I was wrong. Watching you rebuild, seeing you thrive, I should have spoken up when he first started diminishing you. I might not have listened, I admitted. Sometimes we need to discover truth ourselves. Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after Mom's party, I was selecting olive oil at Whole Foods when I saw him. Dominic stood in the pasta aisle, comparing prices on generic brands with the focus of someone counting every dollar. His suit from Target had seen better days, the hem of his pants slightly frayed. The wedding ring I'd placed on his finger 5 years ago was gone, leaving a pale indent on his tan line. He looked up, our eyes meeting across 15 feet of organic produce and broken promises. For a moment, he started to move toward me, his mouth opening as if to speak. But something in my expression, not hatred, not anger, just complete, utter indifference, stopped him mid-step. I looked through him as if he were transparent, then returned to examining olive oil labels. He abandoned his half-full cart in the aisle and walked quickly toward the exit, his shoulders hunched like someone fleeing a crime scene. I continued shopping, adding items for the dinner party I was hosting that weekend for potential investors in my second company. A venture Dominic would read about in business journals he could no longer afford. If Ruby's rise from betrayal to brilliance had you hooked till the last line, smash that like button right now. My favorite moment was when she looked through Dominic in that grocery aisle. Pure, quiet power. What was your favorite scene? Tell me what you think. I really want to know. Have you ever had a moment of pure, shocking clarity that changed everything? I'm excited to hear your stories in the comments. Thanks for watching. Take care.